is rich in Caxtons, contains a copy of the Mazarin Bible, the earliest known printed book, and specimens of early sumptuous and rare books. Anything like an enumeration of its most noteworthy items is, however, quite impossible. 20,000 pamphlets relating to the French Revolution were obtained in the same year. iniquities of his county, and he neglected no opportunity of increasing his collection of chronicles, chautuleries, and other original muniments, which at the late dissolution of the monasteries had found their way into the books of private persons. The collection consists chiefly of ancient chronicles, biblical manuscripts, state papers of the 14th, 15th and 16th centuries, chautuleries, early copies of the Holy Scriptures and of other works, transcripts of and extracts from records, collections relative to various courts, offices, etc., and numerous and valuable manuscripts written in the Anglo-Saxon language. The books are called by the names of the 12 Caesars, from having, when in Sir Robert Cotton's possession, been deposited in presses over which were placed the busts of those emperors, together with those of Cleopatra and Faustina. Sir Robert died in May 1631, his death being hastened by the loss of his library, which had twice been taken possession of by the government, on the plea of it containing information too dangerous to be disseminated. At his death, the library was delivered up to his only son, Sir Thomas Cotton, from whom it descended to his son, Sir John Cotton. In the year 1700, a statute was passed for the better settling and preserving of the library, kept in the house at Westminster called Cotton House, in the name and family of the Cottons, for the benefit of the public. In 1707, an agreement was made by virtue of an Act of Parliament with Sir John Cotton for the purchase of the inheritance of the house, where the library was deposited, for the sum of £4,500. The library was removed to Essex House in Essex Street in the Strand in the year 1712, where it remained until 1730. It was then conveyed to Westminster and deposited in Ashburnham House, situated in Little Dean's Yard, which was purchased by the Crown for that purpose. In the year 1731, a fire unfortunately occurred and destroyed and injured many of the manuscripts. Several of them have been since restored. Before the fire occurred, there were 958 volumes, 114 volumes were destroyed, and 89 volumes were rendered defective, so that only 746 entire volumes remained sound and entire. The library was removed into a new building designed for the dormitory of Westminster School, where they remained until the establishment of the British Museum in 1753, when it was deposited there for the use of the public. The Holly collection was founded by Robert Holly, Earl of Oxford, who was born on the 5th of December 1661. At his death in 1724, his son and successor Edward, the second Earl, followed the noble example set by his father, and devoted a great part of his fortune to the increasing of the collection of books and manuscripts. At his death in June 1741, the library became the property of his daughter and heiress, Margaret Cavendish, Duchess of Portland, and on the institution of the British Museum in 1753, it was purchased of the Duke and Duchess by the country presented to the trustees since the foundation of the British Museum, which have not been deemed of sufficient bulk or importance to form separate collections. Their numbers are, of course, being added to from year to year. The Stowe collection of manuscripts was formed by the Marquis of Buckingham at the beginning of the 19th century and derives its name from Stowe, his country seat, where it was kept. The collection amounted to nearly 1,000 manuscripts and included Anglo-Saxon charters, early English historical manuscripts, also a number of manuscripts in the Irish language and relating to Ireland, and other valuable historical and literary papers. In April 1849, the collection was offered to the trustees of the British Museum, but the negotiations for the purchase failed, and the collection was eventually sold to the late Earl of Ashburnham. In the year 1883, the trustees of the British Museum purchased the Stowe manuscripts, apart from Lord Ashburnham's other collections, and this valuable mass of historical material was, by order of the government, deposited in the British Museum, excepting certain Irish manuscripts and manuscripts relating to Ireland, which were transferred to the library of the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin. Large acquisitions to the treasures of the manuscript department have been made from time to time by purchase and donation. Department of Prints and Drawings. Among the contents of this department are included the collections of Sir William Hamilton, acquired in 1772, Mr. Townley, 1805, 1814, Baron Moll, 1815, Mr. Payne Knight, 1824, Mr. Sheepshanks, purchased in 1836, Mr. Harding, purchased in 1842, Raphael Morgan's works, purchased in 1843, Sir William Gell's drawings, bequeathed by the Honourable Keppel Craven, 1852, the political prints of Mr. Edward Hawkins, formerly Keeper of the Antiquities, purchased in 1867, the collection of Mr. Felix Slade, bequeathed in 1868, and that of Mr. John Henderson, bequeathed in 1878. A fine series of prints is exhibited to the public in the second Northern Gallery. The contents of the department are of the greatest value and interest, many of the prints being in the finest possible state, and many of the original drawings being the work of the old masters, but it is quite impossible to particularize them in this account. In addition to the various official catalogues, etc., published by order of the trustees, a valuable handbook to the Department of Prints and Drawings in the British Museum was published in the year 1876 by Mr. Louis Fagan, one of the officers of that department. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. I think next time we will start with the Department of Antiquities. I hope you enjoyed that. This has been